Hello, and welcome to another Read With Me session. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell. I'm here to read with you. And I'm super excited about this particular chapter in the psychology of money because we are talking about a topic that is very dear to me, which is all about freedom. Freedom. Okay, freedom to me is everything. And I'm very interested in to see what Mr. Morgan Housel has to say about freedom. This particular book has been it's a type of book that makes you think. So I really appreciate the way it has been done, how it's been written, because it's definitely different than the ones that I've read this year. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm also interested in a different perspective because sometimes if you don't get different perspectives from a topic that's quite important, which is money, you're kind of stuck in like what the mainstream is talking about, or you don't know what the insider information is all about. So I think this particular book has given me some great insight on just shifting specific things within my thought process about money or my understanding about money so I can make better decisions in the future. And I hope it's done that for you as well. So without further ado, let's get into chapter number 7, freedom. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different. But if there's a common denominator in happiness, a universal fuel of joy, it's that people want to control their lives. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Angus Campbell was a psychologist at the University of Michigan, born in 1910. His research took place during an age when psychology was overwhelmingly focused on disorders that brought people down, things like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. Campbell wanted to know what made people happy. His 1981 book, The Sense of Well-Being in America, starts by pointing out that people are generally happier than many psychologists assumed, but some were clearly doing better than others. And you couldn't necessarily group them by income or geography or education because so many in each of those categories ended up chronically unhappy. The most powerful common denominator of happiness was simple. Campbell summed it up like this: having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the object conditions of life we have considered. Wow. Having a strong sense of control of one's life. More than your salary, more than the size of your house, more than your prestige job, control overdoing what you want, when you want, with the people you want to, is the broadest lifestyle variable that makes people happy. Money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, it is the ability to give you control over your time, to obtain bit by bit a level of independence and autonomy that comes from unspent assets that give you greater control over what you can do and what you can do it. A small amount of wealth means the ability to take a few days off work when you're sick without breaking the bank. Gaining the ability is huge if you don't have it. A bit more means waiting for a good job to come around after you get laid off, rather than having to take the first one you find. That can be life-changing. 6 months emergency expenses means not being terrified of your boss because you know you won't be ruined if you have to take some time off to find a new job. And more still means the ability to take a job with lower pay but flexible hours. maybe one with a shorter commute, or being able to deal with a medical emergency without the added burden of worrying about how you'll pay for it. Then there's retiring when you want to, instead of when you need to. Using your money to buy time and options has a lifestyle benefit few luxury goods can compete with. Throughout college, I wanted to be an investment banker. There was only one reason why. They made a lot of money. That was the only drive. And I was 100% positive would make me happier once I got it. I scored a summer internship at an investment bank in Los Angeles my junior year and thought I won the career lottery. This is all I ever wanted. On my first day, I realized why investment bankers make a lot of money. They work longer and more controlled hours than I knew humans could handle. Actually, most can't handle it. Going home before midnight was considered a luxury. And there was a saying in the office, if you don't come to work on Saturday, don't bother coming back on Sunday. The job was intellectual stimulating, paid well, and made me feel important. But every walking second of my time became a slave to my boss's demands, which was enough to turn it into one of the most miserable experiences of my life. It was a 4-month internship. I lasted a month. The hardest thing about this was that I loved the work and I wanted it to work hard, but doing something you love on a schedule you can't control can feel the same as doing something that you hate. That's a strong line too. Yeah. There is a name for this feeling. Psychologists call it reactance. Jonah Berger, a marketing professional at the University of Pennsylvania, summed it up like this. People like to feel they're in control, in the driver's seat. When we try to get them to do something, they feel disempowered. Rather than feeling like they made the choice, they feel like we made it for them. So they say no or do something else, even when they might have originally been happy to go along. When you accept how true that statement is, you realize that aligning money towards a life that lets you do what you want, when you want it, with who you want it, where you want it, for as long as you want, has an incredible return. Derek Sivers, a successful entrepreneur, once wrote about a friend who asked him to tell a story about how he got rich. He says, I had a day job in Midtown Manhattan, paid $20K per year, about minimum wage. I never ate out. I never took a taxi. My cost of living was about $1,000 a month, and I was earning $1,800 a month. I did this for 2 years and saved up $1,200. I was 22 years old. Once I had $12,000, I could quit my job and become a full-time musician. I knew I could get a few gigs per month to pay my cost of living, so I was free. I quit my job a month later and never had a job again. When I finished telling my friend this story, he asked for more. I said, no, that's it. He said, no, what about when you sold your company? And I said, no, that didn't make a big difference in my life. That was just more money in the bank. The difference happened when I was 22. In the United States is considered the richest nation in the history of the world. But there's little evidence that its citizens are, on average, happier today than they were in the 1950s when wealth and income were much lower, even at the median level and adjusted for inflation. A 2019 Gallup poll of 150,000 people in 140 countries found that about 45% of Americans said that they felt a lot of worry the previous day. The global average was 39%. 55% of Americans said that they felt a lot of stress the previous day. For the rest of the world, 35% said the same. Part of what happened here is that we've used our greater wealth to buy bigger and better stuff, but we've simultaneously given up more control over our time. At best, those things cancel each other out. Median family income adjusted for inflation was $29,000 in 1955. In 2019, it was just over $62,000. We've used that wealth to live a life hardly conceivable into the 1950s American. Even for a median family, the median American home increased from 983 square feet in 1950 to 2,400 square feet in 2018. The average new American home now has more bathrooms than occupants. That's so true. Our cars are faster and more efficient. Our TVs are cheaper and sharper. What happened to our time? On the other hand, what happened to our time? On the other hand, barely looks like progress. And a lot of the reason has to do with the kind of jobs more of us now have. John D. Rockefeller was one of the most successful businessmen of all time. He was also a recluse, spending most of his time by himself. He rarely spoke, deliberately making himself inaccessible and staying quiet when you caught his attention. A refinery worker who occasionally had Rockefeller's ear once remarked, "He lets everybody else talk, while he sits back and says nothing." When asked about his silence during meetings, Rockefeller often recited a poem. A wise old owl lived in an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we all like that wise old bird? Rockefeller was a strange guy, but he figured out something that now applies to tens of millions of workers. Rockefeller's job wasn't to drill wells, load trains, or move barrels. It was to think and make good decisions. Rockefeller's products, his deliverable, wasn't what he did with his hands or even his words. It was what he figured out in his head. So that's where he spent most of his time and energy. Despite sitting quietly most of the day, and it might have looked like free time or leisure hours to most people, but he was constantly working in his mind, thinking problems through. That's strong. This was unique in his day. Almost all jobs during Rockefeller's time required doing things with your hands. In the 1870s, 46% of jobs were in agriculture and 35% were in arts and manufacturing, according to economist Robert Gordon. Few professions relied on a worker's brain. You didn't think, you labored without interruption, and your work was visible and tangible. Today, that's flipped. 38% of jobs are now designated as managers, officials, or professionals. These are decision-making jobs. Another 41% of service jobs that often rely on your thoughts as much as your actions. More of us have jobs that look closer to Rockefeller than a typical 1950s manufacturing worker, which means our days don't end when we clock out and leave the factory. We're constantly working in our heads, which means it feels like work never ends. If your job is to build cars, there's little you can do when you're not in the assembly line. You detach from work, you leave your tools in the factory. But if your job is to create a marketing campaign, a thought-based and decision job, your tool is your head, which never leaves you. You might be thinking about your project during your commute, as you're making dinner, while you're putting your kids to sleep, and when you wake up stressed at 3 in the morning. You might be on the clock for fewer hours than you would in 1950, but it feels like you're working 24/7. Derek Thompson, The Atlantic, once described it like this. If the operating equipment of the 21st century is a portable device, this means the modern factory is not a place at all. It is the day itself. The computer age has liberated the tools of productivity from the office. Most knowledge workers whose laptops and smartphones are portable, all-purpose media making machines can theoretically be productive at 2 p.m. in the main office as at 2 a.m. in a Tokyo WeWork or at midnight on the couch. Compared to generations prior, control over your time has diminished. And since controlling your time is such a key happiness influencer, we shouldn't be surprised that people don't feel much happier, even though we are, on average, richer than ever. What do we do about that? It's not an easy problem to solve because everyone's different. The first step is to merely acknowledge what does and does not make almost everyone happy. In his book, 30 Lessons of Living, gerontologist Carl Palmer interviewed 1,000 elderly Americans looking for the most important lessons they learned from decades of life experience. He wrote, no one, not a single person out of the 1,000, said that to be happy, you should try to work as hard as you can to make money to buy the things you want. Not one, not a single person said it's important to be at least as wealthy as the people around you. And if you have more than they do, it's a real success. And no one, not a single person, said you should choose your work based on your desired future earning power. What they did value were things like quality friendships, being part of something bigger than themselves, spending quality, unstructured time with their children. Your kids don't want your money or what your money buys anywhere near as much as they want you. Specifically, they want you with them, Palomar writes. Take it from those who have lived through everything. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. Now, a short chapter on one of the lowest dividends money pays. Damn, that was a good one. That was a really, really great chapter. Really, really great chapter. I really like how that was set up. And I really like that study. I will do some kind of study like that where like we can really ask that freedom question, because that's one of my favorite questions to ask people, like, what does freedom mean to you? And it's literally summed up the way he said it. And I truly believe that's how everyone wants to experience freedom. And I'm going to take this opportunity to actually go into this very short chapter, so like literally only a page. It's chapter 8, Man in the Car Paradox. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. The best part of being a valet is getting to drive some of the coolest cars to ever touch pavement. Guests come in driving Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, the whole aristocratic fleet. It was my dream to have one of these cars of my own because I thought they sent such a strong signal to others that you made it. You're smart, you're rich, you have taste, you look important, look at me. The irony is that I rarely, if ever, looked at them, the drivers. When you see someone driving a nice car, you rarely think, wow, that guy driving that cool car, that guy driving that car is cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool, subconscious or not. This is how people think. There's a paradox here. People tend to want wealth to signal to others that they should be liked and admired. But in reality, those other people often bypass admiring you, not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. The letter I wrote after my son was born said, you might think you want an expensive car, a fancy watch, and a huge house, but I'm telling you don't. What you want is respect and admiration from other people, and you think having expensive stuff will bring it. It almost never does, especially from the people you want to respect and admire you. I learned that as a valet when I was thinking about all the people driving up to the hotel in their Ferraris watching me gawk. People must gawk everywhere they went, and I'm sure they loved it. I'm sure they felt admired. But did they know I did not care about them or even notice them? Did they know I was only gawking at the car and imagining myself in the driver's seat? Did they buy a Ferrari thinking it would bring them admiration without realizing that I and likely most others who are impressed with the car didn't actually give them, the driver, a moment thought? Does this same idea apply to those living in big homes? Almost certainly. Jewelry and clothes? Yep. My point here is not to abandon the pursuit of wealth or even fancy cars. I like both. It's a subtle recognition that people generally aspire to respect, to be respected and admired by others. And using money to buy fancy things may bring less of it than you can imagine. If respect and admiration are your goal, be careful how you seek it. Humility, kindness, empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower will ever will. We're not done talking about Ferraris. Another story about the paradox of fast cars is in the next chapter. And the next chapter is wealth is what you don't see. I'm excited about that one. But I really like the chapter of freedom. By far my favorite chapter of this book so far. So I hope you got a lot of value out of it. I would love to hear your thoughts on this particular book if you've read it already. I'm excited for what's to come, and I look forward to seeing you in our BIC Inner Circle, Billionaire Inner Circle, where we dive deeper into these particular books together as a group, because it's one thing to just read the books. There's a different level to understanding what you're reading and applying what you're reading, because you can read a bunch of different books and not do anything. I like what Alex Ramosi was mentioning. He's like, if you're going to be reading just to read, then you're wasting time. And if time is your most valuable asset, then you don't respect yourself or your time, right? How do you expect others to pay you? So if you are going to commit to actually reading books and to understand what's going on with the books, you have to treat them as like lessons, as like, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to take the time out for myself. I'm going to really take this in, and I'm going to apply what I learned. And if you do apply what you learned, then you're unstoppable. So we believe that if you are taking the inspiration, the knowledge, the readings, the communication, and the lessons that we're sharing with you on this channel to heart, and you apply them in your life, you will be able to achieve financial and personal freedom like that. I look forward to seeing you, and I'll see you later. Bye.